This meeting is being recorded.
Oh. Christina, it looks like we're not on the first slide. We will be welcoming Kyla Smith, climate justice organizer, soon. Okay. Well, welcome everyone to 350 Wisconsin. My name's Julia Isaacs. I'm one of the co-leads of the monthly meeting team. Kelly Kearns is another one. Christina Cook is our Zoom host. Marion Friedel will be introducing our speaker, and Susan Nossel is also helping out with the tech side of things. So we have a robust monthly meeting team bringing this event to you. Next slide. So I'm going to share that this slide was actually taken on December 5th, 2 years ago. I was looking through my slides. I was like, oh, December 5th. So we pause. We've been doing this since we moved to Zoom. We pause to take a couple of deep breaths with our feet planted firmly on the ground. As we look at this photo, this is looking west from near where I live on near Lake Monona. So breathe in and out. And in and out. So we also use this time of reflection to acknowledge that we live on lands that were stewarded for centuries by Indigenous peoples. This photo is a picture of Madison, which is the ancestral homeland of the Ho-Chungra, or people of the sacred voice, who today are known as members of the Ho-Chunk Nation. So from like the 1830s to the 1870s, the Ho-Chunk went through 11 attempts to remove them from the land, where they were forced off their land and taken to reservations to the west. The Ho-Chunk who live here today are descended from some of those who kept coming back, sometimes walking back. So as we tell this tale of ethnic cleansing, I want to make sure we recognize the great losses, but also the courage and resistance of the survivors who endured and came back to live on their ancestral lands here in this 4-lake area they call Dejop. Next slide. So our evening's pretty simple tonight. We're not doing a lot of complicated stuff at the beginning. We're going to turn right to our main event, which is to hear from Kyla Smith, who is our new climate justice organizer for 350 Wisconsin. She's going to speak about community needs assessment as a first step toward collaborative and effective climate justice. Then we have a number of updates and information on upcoming events, including an update about the Mansion Dirty Deal that we just are going to be making at the end. And then we will have time at the end to welcome newcomers. I know that there are probably newcomers here. We welcome you now, but we'll have a special time to welcome you near the end of our meeting, and then some of us will go into optional breakouts. So with that, I want to turn it over to Marion, who is, I believe, lead or co-lead of the climate justice team. You want to introduce Kyla?
Great. Thank you, Julia. I'm so excited to introduce Kyla Smith, which Julia told you a little bit about her talk tonight. But we're so lucky that Kyla accepted the position of the climate justice organizer because it just seems to be such a perfect fit for us at this time. Tonight, she'll talk about her work as an environmental justice climate fellow with Mobilize Green in Detroit. Kyla is a recent Whitewater graduate. She grew up in the Madison area, and she has experienced environmental injustice as a young person, including food deserts, lack of green spaces, etc. So her personal and professional and academic experience is in these areas. And so we really feel very lucky to have her with us. If you have any questions about her talk, You can put them in the chat and then we will deal with them at the end of the talk. And so without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Kyla Smith.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Marianne. Let me just share my slides real quick. And like Marianne was saying, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat, or feel free to, at the end of the presentation, unmute yourself so that you can say your questions and get them answered. So my name's Kyla Smith. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the climate justice organizer for 350 Wisconsin. I've been in this position since mid-September. And then today I'm going to talk about mainly my experience doing work in Detroit as an environmental justice climate equity fellow with Mobilize Green. And basically talk about the importance of having community input in the process of going towards climate justice. So before I get started, I just want to acknowledge the land that we're residing on is stolen land. And since we are in Wisconsin, I wanted to make sure we had a map of all Wisconsin to show the different tribes that we have here. So we have the Ho-Chunk, Menominee, Ojibwe, Dakota, and the Potawatomi. And if you want to learn more about the land you reside on, you can go to native-land.ca. And that website's kind of cool because you can actually put any address in there and it will show you the land you reside on and also the overlapping areas of the different tribes that are there. And then on top of that, if you want to learn more about specifically Wisconsin Indigenous communities, you can go to wisconsinfirstnations.org. So getting into my presentation of community needs assessment, I just wanted to give you a little download of what a community needs assessment is. So this is primarily just a widespread word, umbrella word for saying we're going to assess the needs, characteristics, and values of a particular community. This can be a neighborhood, a zip code, and primarily with planning committees' approaches in terms of climate planning and environmental planning, a lot of community input and perspectives are kind of just thrown out. They do look at the unique situations going on in the area, but they don't really concentrate or focus on the different community inputs in terms of the frontline communities that are actually living through the most overburdened situations for environmental and climate issues. So when we look at climate justice related community needs assessments, there's a few questions we ask ourselves. So what are the prominent environmental and climate injustices in this area? Are there any disparities in terms of racial, ethnic, demographic, socioeconomic status, or even a particular geographic location that's disproportionately feeling the burden of climate issues? Also, are there any policies, or is there a lack of policy that's creating this problem? And are there any policies that are enabling this problem? And lastly, which kind of goes into the first question about the historical context as to why these environmental and climate injustices are going on. In terms of the importance of environmental justice and climate justice community needs assessments and community inputs, there's a few, and I'm going to show you some screenshots actually of some documents that were done in collaboration of different principles for climate and environmental justice. The first one being from the 10 Principles for Just Climate Change Policies in the United States, which was actually created in Michigan in 2004. Their fourth principle is talking about requiring community participation. And this is within the decision-making process. So in terms of policy. There's also another document that is a little bit older. It was created in 1991, and this is the Principles of Environmental Justice. This was actually created by people of color, which when we look at environmental injustices that go on, disproportionate amount takes place within low income and communities of color. But this particular principle is talking about how there needs to be participation on all levels of decision making in terms of assessment, planning, implementation, enforcement, evaluation. So those two are just showing kind of the importance overall of incorporating community perspectives into all processes when it comes to policy and decision making, but even more importantly within looking at needs assessments. So going on to kind of more information about like planning committees, and kind of my issue with them is that a lot of them don't really bring in the community perspectives. That kind of go off of expert opinions. And I put this in quotations because a lot of the times these experts are usually like academic experts. And I kind of think of it as like, who's more of an expert on the land than the people that actually go through these injustices on a daily basis. There's also a lot of barriers. So when there actually is listening sessions and feedback sessions by community members, there's a lot of barriers that are put into that. I kind of gave like an example of like what usually happens. Usually the session is during the middle of the day, which a lot of people have work. So they kind of can't just stop working and go down to whatever building they have to go and talk about their feedback for any planning committee that is going on. It's usually in a geographical location that's far away. So the examples could be, it's usually at like a municipality building, downtown Madison. And this brings on more barriers. So paying for parking is a very big barrier. Some people don't have the money to pay for parking in a downtown setting. Conflicting with work schedules, like I was saying before. Childcare might also be a barrier. And also having people go from their familiar space in their own community to an unfamiliar space might be intimidating. So in terms of the work that I did in Detroit, and I guess I should put in quotations because I did this in a virtual format, but I was an environmental justice climate equity fellow with Mobilize Green, a nonprofit based out of Washington, D.C. And in terms of my work there, we were in teams of about 4 to 5 people. And within my team, we had to do a community needs assessment and also give project recommendations on how to address the environmental injustices that were going on within our target city of Detroit. So in terms of the methodology for our community needs assessment, we had stakeholder and community member interviews, which I thought this was very important to do just to get the actual feedback from the people that are on the frontline communities in Detroit. We also created and disseminated or distributed a survey for Detroit residents to take and talk about the environmental injustices they see on a daily basis and also what projects they think would best solve those issues. And then also we did data collection in the means of looking at public health statistics and also looking at GIS maps for environmental justice burden scores. In terms of results, and I'm going to go off the questions that I talked about earlier for the community needs assessments, questions that we usually ask when we're looking at climate justice. For the prominent environmental and climate injustices that were within the area, and also giving historical context, there's 3 areas that I'm going to be talking about. The first one is that Detroit is known as the Motor City of America, which meant there was a lot of industrialization at one point. And this industrialization occurred specifically after World War II. And with industrialization usually comes people not really caring about the environmental implications of this industrialization. So the environment was kind of put to the back burner and there weren't any protections or any laws or policies saying that certain industries can pump out like only this amount of particulate matter or pollution into the air on a daily basis. On top of that, there's a lot of traffic that goes through Detroit. So if we look at Detroit geographically, Detroit is actually on the border of the United States and Canada. So there's a lot of semi-traffic that goes through, which leads to a lot of diesel combustion, and that's really bad for air quality. There's actually an estimate that upwards of 70,000 vehicles have made their way or make their way through or around Detroit on a daily basis. And on top of this and the amount of industries that are in Detroit, this leads to a very poor outdoor air quality, which actually has led to Detroit residents having a 2 times higher rate of asthma than other people in the state of Michigan. And then on top of that, due to the industrialization happening and the big boom in economic business happening in right after the World War II, there had to be a lot of houses to accommodate for the amount of people that actually live there. And that means that a lot of the infrastructure, and when I say infrastructure, I mean housing, a lot of that infrastructure is pretty old. And there's a statistic that actually says that 80.4% of homes were built before 1960. And this is important because there's 2 particular bans that happened after 1960. So there was the 1978 ban on lead paint, and then the 1989 partial ban on asbestos containing products. And that basically means that a lot of those homes actually probably have trace amounts of lead still in their paint if there hasn't been lead abatement, and also trace amounts of asbestos, likely from the insulation within the homes. And this creates a phenomenon called indoor pollution. There's also a phenomenon that the old infrastructure creates called energy burden. And energy burden relates to the amount of money that a household has to spend on energy bills compared to their income. So energy burden basically means that households have to spend a lot of their income on that energy bill. And sometimes there's instances where people even have to decide if they pay their energy bill versus getting groceries or other essential needs that they have. On top of that, since the houses are old, there's instances of the house not being weatherized, and also there not being energy efficient products, which relates to the energy burden going on. And so there's actually 3 more instances of environmental injustices going on in Detroit that I didn't put on these slides just for time's sake, but I'm going to go over them a little bit. The first one being very big. So when we were doing community interviews, the community members that we interviewed actually told us that they felt kind of exploited when they were talking about environmental injustices going on in their community. And this was mainly because they would see a lot of primarily white organizations come into their community, ask them what's going on, and then they kind of just dip and never say anything after that. They wouldn't give any updates on the projects that might be going on, any updates on any reports. So they kind of felt like they were being used, and nothing was getting done because of this usage. On top of that, another environmental injustice going on in Detroit is food apartheid, which a lot of people say is food deserts. Food apartheid is basically the systemic discrimination of a lot of grocery stores not being within a community. So there's a lack of grocery stores in the community. And even when there are grocery stores in that community, there's a lack of fresh and affordable fruits and vegetables. So there's that going on, and also a phenomenon called food swamps, which actually relates to a large amount of fast food restaurants being concentrated in one area. And then the last issue is that there's been a lot of historic flooding, especially in East Detroit, which leads to a lot of more implications for the housing there. So there could be mold formation because of this, because of the historic flooding. And on top of that, there's justice implications in terms of there not being enough trees for tree canopy to kind of protect the community in case there is flooding from happening. In terms of a specific disparity seen within this community, on top of Detroit being 77.1% Black, there is a zip code that I want to bring to your attention. It's the 48217 zip code. And this zip code in particular has the worst air quality in Michigan, and it's in the top 20 of the most polluted zip codes in the United States. It's located in Southwest Detroit, and I'm going to pull up a few images from the area. So actually on the left-hand side, this image is of the Marathon Oil Refinery located in the 48217 zip code. It's actually estimated that 650 people die per day due to air pollution in the zip code, and this is a statistic from the University of Michigan School of Public Health. And then there also is this image on the right that shows a playground. And in the background, that actually was the world's largest incinerator. So right next to a school, they placed the world's largest incinerator. And luckily, this was closed down thanks to grassroots efforts, actually by one of the people that I interviewed, Sandra Turner Handy. So that's no more, but that still has a lot of justice implications that they would have this incinerator right next to a school that is predominantly Black. In terms of it being predominantly Black, the zip code is 80.7% Black. So it's a little bit more concentrated of Black persons compared to the city of Detroit. And the median household income is actually $26,000, which means that a lot of residents live under the poverty line or identify as low income. So in terms of the project recommendation that I decided to give, I went ahead, and this was based mainly off the feedback of our survey. So here you can see that there's this graphic that one of my teammates made. And the question is asking, what additional project goals do you believe will increase the health of you and your community? The top answer being decreased vehicle traffic. And the best way that I could find to hopefully influence a little bit of vehicle traffic, especially through neighborhoods, is to incorporate an air quality monitoring system. And so basically this will allow for community members to have their own air quality monitor, either in their backyard, or this can be on their mailbox. And this will allow data to be collected on the air quality on a daily basis. This data can actually be used, hopefully maybe to bring to policymakers to put protections in place for the neighborhoods. On top of that, if you combine this strategy with neighborhood reporting, you can show potentially if there's semi trucks or truckers that are taking alternative routes that they're not supposed to be taking through neighborhoods. This was actually based off of a project I found from New Jersey, where a lot of residents were complaining about how there was semi trucks going through their neighborhoods that had the little sign that said trucks over 2 tons can't go through there, but they were still going through there. And then on top of that, this project will also increase community engagement and also mobilization to hopefully have that community be able to have environmental justice solutions for themselves. So when connecting this to Wisconsin, there's actually a report that just came out a few weeks ago, and it's with this article was done by Inside Climate News, and the report, I believe, was done by the Northeast Midwest Climate Research Group. And it basically showed that Wisconsin was the second worst state in terms of environmental justice issues. And the factors that were actually taken into account for this report included state agencies that were dedicated to environmental justice resolutions being passed by state legislatures, and also there being access to public online tools that will help communities understand environmental justice issues. On top of that, environmental injustices that are currently going on in Wisconsin include old sewage infrastructure in Milwaukee, which is actually talked about in this article. This can lead to flooding happening pretty quickly. And there actually was a case out of Jackson, Mississippi, where their wastewater treatment plant was flooded over, and that created actually a contamination issue. There's also outdated building codes, which don't protect the residents that are living in the buildings, especially in terms of renters. There's lead pipes, especially in the Milwaukee area. And there's also lead paint still within older homes. And traditionally, especially when you look at Milwaukee and Madison, a lot of the homes there are older, and a lot of them are renter occupied. So that can also be, I guess, a barrier, because then they don't have, I guess, the say in doing like lead or asbestos abatement within their homes. And then on top of that, most plans in Wisconsin don't really incorporate community knowledge or inputs within their planning processes. And although I said all these like terrible things that are going on in Wisconsin, there are some positive things that are being shifted within Wisconsin in terms of climate and environmental justice. So there's been a lot more involvement of nonprofit and grassroots organizations in terms of environmental justice issues. It's been very intentional, a lot more intentional than it has been in the past. On top of that, the Inflation Reduction Act, which recently came out in the summer, a lot of grassroots and nonprofit organizations are trying to figure out how Wisconsinites can utilize the Inflation Reduction Act. And then also Tony Evers did actually create an executive order on Earth Day this year to create an Office of Environmental Justice. There hasn't been really any updates as to like what's going on with that. But I know that there was a listing actually for someone to be an analyst within the Environmental Justice Department, and it'll be housed in the Department of Natural Resources. And then lastly, and definitely not least, there's a very great plan that's actually being finalized. The full report will be put out soon. There is a draft on it that came out in October, but it's the Milwaukee City and County Climate and Equity Plan. And when I say that this plan is amazing, it's amazing in that it incorporates a lot of community perspectives and a lot of community engagement. So not only is this plan basically saying like what's going on with the environment, it's saying what issues are our residents going through the most. And it came up with this plan of the 10 big ideas. And it's a very good report. I definitely recommend reading it and looking more into the big 10 ideas. And also they do have a comment period going on right now to give feedback on this plan. So if you read it and you see something that you don't like, you can always say something about it in the comment period. But in terms of that, that is all I have for y'all. If you have any questions, you can say them now. I know that Marion has been monitoring the chat. So Marion, you can say the questions right now if you'd like, or you can always raise your hand and unmute yourself when you're called on to say your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyla. That was really very good, very interesting. We do have a couple of questions in the chat, and we can start with Steve, who asks, could you say more about the connection between the tree canopy and flooding?
Yeah, so basically tree canopies and tree areas could actually be kind of a natural barrier to flooding. It doesn't prevent flooding from happening, but it's seen that when there's areas with more trees that can kind of block off the flooding from making the area kind of have more of a disastrous outcome. But yeah, that's the.
Okay. And Kathleen asks, what are your thoughts on the Dane County Climate Action Plan regarding climate justice?
I actually have not read that. And you said the Dane County Climate Action Plan?
Dane County Climate Action Plan. Yep.
Yeah, I haven't read about that. When did it come out? And I can look into that actually, because I know there's been a lot of plans coming out lately, so it's kind of hard keeping up with them.
It really is. Christina wants to know, how did you learn about community needs assessment, and what tips would you offer to someone who wanted to get involved in that kind of work?
Yeah, so I didn't even know what that was until I did my fellowship this summer. So I learned what a community needs assessment was. While in the fellowship, I actually was able to do a full community needs assessment. The fellowship was 8 weeks long, so I didn't get to do it as in depth as I wanted to. But in terms of doing work like this, I'm not particularly sure what specific jobs are out there that you could do this. You could be on a planning committee where you actually incorporate more of community needs assessments within the plan that's going on. But there's really not like a particular like career out there that you only focus on community needs assessments. It's usually a part of a specific job you do. So whether that be on a planning committee or other roles.
We have a couple more questions, but Steve is raising his hand. Steve, do you want to follow up with your other question? Got to unmute.
Yeah. Okay. I wanted to follow up on my question to Kyla regarding tree canopy and flooding. And I agree with her assessment of the situation, but the City of Madison stormwater engineers take the opposite view, that tree canopies in urban flooding situations, especially in, we might say, pockets of poverty, say that the trees have to go and that the former tree area has to be excavated to make it larger so it'll hold more stormwater. And so you might want to follow up with City Madison stormwater engineers on a number of projects they have on the west side of town, where they're removing huge numbers of trees that they call junk trees. And in the process, they're releasing large amounts of sequestered carbon, and they're reducing the cooling effect of the canopies in these neighborhoods. They're reducing the ability of these urban forests to provide shade and cooling and to attenuate noise impacts from nearby highways and so forth. So I think the way that City of Madison stormwater engineers are approaching some projects do have climate justice implications.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. And also you brought in like that aspect of like even having like the sequestering of carbon. And there's actually a phenomenon that goes on when there's a lack of trees, especially in an urban area, called the urban heat island effect. And that's largely because there's not that many trees in the area to actually kind of absorb the heat from the area. But thank you for bringing that to my attention, because I did not know that was going on. You said it was through the city of Madison.
I'll send you some details.
Okay, alrighty.
City of Madison Engineering.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Couple more questions I think we have time for. Susan asks if you could say more about the Milwaukee City and County plan. What elements of this plan would you like to see in the Madison-Dane County area?
So basically, the Milwaukee City and County equity and climate plan brings together a lot of the community perspective aspects. So I particularly wouldn't want to, I guess, say I want to see certain things until I gain the community perspectives from Madisonians first. But there are a lot of really good items in the plan. I like the plan overall, and in specific, there's actually an economic equity aspect to it in terms of increasing the amount of particularly like persons of color in the green job sector. So I think that would like be an overall very good part of the plan to bring here. In terms of the other aspects like food waste or water infrastructure upgrades, I'd probably want to get more community perspectives and input on that before like making a definitive say on like what we should do in Madison.
Judith has a kind of a follow-up to that also. She wants to know who is in the lead for who is the lead and who will report out the findings and recommendations of that Milwaukee plan, the mayor or the county executive. Do you know?
I know. So actually, two of the leads of that plan was recently at the Climate Fast Forward conference, and I'm blanking on their names. I'm not particularly sure if I know that they're going to bring this plan to the mayor to hopefully have him like approve it and kind of go forth with doing the plan in the city and county. But there is a list of people that have contributed and also like the main people on the committee in the plan if you would like to look more into that. And I can put the link to that plan in the chat once I'm done taking questions.
Does anyone else have any questions? I think, and unless I missed one, I think we went through the ones in the chat. Here's one from Sheila. Can you comment on the proposals for electric school buses within the environmentally injustice school districts?
Comment as in, like, say my opinion?
I think I think Sheila, if you're out there and want to clarify, that would be great.
Yeah, I just was wondering if you could comment on that. I know that school districts these plans are open to them at the moment, but I don't know if that is difficult for those areas to actually get this implemented. It's a big, long application for the school districts to go through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I don't know that much about like EV related stuff, and I know that electrical vehicle stuff is on the rise. Like it's kind of becoming more popular and it's being incorporated into a lot of plans, and even has been incorporated into the Inflation Reduction Act on building more like infrastructure for charging ports and everything. But in terms of like building school buses and buses, I feel like that has more of a community implication because people have to, like large amounts of people have to rely on school buses or city buses. So I like that plan. In terms of the application process, that's always like a really big barrier that I see when it comes to people making these different technologies and different grants accessible, but then the application is like 10 million pages long. And sometimes people don't have the capacity in terms of like employees or people that are super knowledgeable on the application process to be able to go forth with that. So yeah, those are, I guess, my opinions on that.
Okay, I think that's all the questions we have, and it's perfect timing. So thank you so much, Kyla, for your presentation. We really appreciate it. And
Yeah, thank you.
mhm.
Thank you, Kyla, for sharing. And thank you to the climate justice team for organizing this. And we thought we would have our first action update from the climate justice team. Next slide. We have different teams are going to share short little snippets of their work, and Tennis is going to speak about a video that the climate justice team would like us to watch. I think you want to introduce it, Tennis, and then Christina will play it.
Sure. Great. Thank you, Julia. And thank you, Kyla. I just want to underscore what Marion said. We're so happy to have you working with us here at 350 Wisconsin. So this is going to be a very brief video that has another perspective on climate justice. This is more of the international perspective. So it's just a reminder, I guess, for us that climate justice issues are everywhere at the local level, community level, the state, national, and international level. This is a video from COP27, and it has to do with the issue of loss and damage, which I'm sure most of you have heard of this. It's the concept of the countries that have caused climate change paying or providing some sort of assistance to the countries who are facing the most serious impacts of climate change, but who did not cause it. We're using, so they created a loss and damage fund, but they didn't really fund it. They just created it. So hopefully that will be more fully funded in the future. And so this is a 10-year-old girl, a very poignant speech, very brief again. And I would suggest you might want to turn the volume up on your computers. She speaks very softly, but it's just a reminder about the global impact of climate change and the people who are being affected by it. So with that, please start.
My name is Nakia Dramani Sam. I'm 10 and I'm from Ghana. Many of us see dark clouds gathering on the horizon of Mother Earth because some of the communities in my country, Ghana, are paying heavy prices since our planet was lit on fire. When can you pay us back? Because payment is overdue. As we say in the CVF, the fate of the most vulnerable will be the fate of the world. So dear people, at this COP, I appeal to you, have a heart and do the math. It is an emergency. Act here now. Duty bearers, kindly take up your game. Thank you very much for your attention.
And that's it, very short. And thank you for the opportunity to show that. It was very heartfelt from her to the conference.
Thank you for bringing that to us, Tanis. So for this next announcement, I'm going to take off my monthly meeting team hat and put on my divest and defund hat and let you know that we are looking for customers of Chase or Wells Fargo banks. When I say customer, I mean somebody who has a credit card, a mortgage, a checking account, anything would make you a customer. We're looking for customers and we would like to train you how to meet with your bank branch manager one-on-one, sort of person to person, and advocate for climate justice, sharing what your concerns are, about what's happening, finding out about, how they view it, and trying to engage with them and ask them to bring the concern up to their manager. And you might wonder, how would I do this? How would I meet with my bank manager? Well, we're going to put on a 1-hour online training. I think it's about 6 weeks from now. We're getting early start on it, letting you know about it now. Now, perhaps like many people in Madison, you're not a customer. You have an account with a credit union, which is great. You can still, if you want, help us out. There's a small team of 3 to 4 to 5 of us who are going to be putting on this training. You can help with publicity, with outreach, with Zoom tech support. If you're interested, just put your name in the chat. We'll also have a breakout when the meeting's over, the Divest and Defund breakout. We'll talk more about this. You can let Nikki Darga know that you're interested. She's on the team with me and Ruby and others. And you come to, we're having our first planning meeting. We're at the very early, well, we've had some planning meetings, but our first moving ahead planning meeting is on Wednesday night. And so if you want to get on the ground floor, please join us. And if don't want to get on the ground floor, please come January 30th and join the training. Next slide. I think that Susan has a quick announcement from the Community Climate Solutions team.
Well, yes, thank you. And I do want to acknowledge that Kermit Hovey, who was one of the founders of the Community Climate Solutions team, had to take a break from CCST, but I'm delighted to say that we have a new volunteer who's helping us, stepping up as a new CCSD co-lead, and that is Rachel Robillard. I don't know if she's in the room, but I'm really thankful for her. I'm also very thankful that Kevin Spittler has stepped up to lead the community working group in Middleton. And I'm delighted that Grace Martin, a fellow here with 350 Wisconsin, is helping out with CCST. And I just want to keep saying to everybody, we have to, everybody needs to be able to pick up some of the leadership roles within our organization to the best of our ability so that we can distribute the leadership and really continue to make a big difference. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Susan. Rachel, do you want to give a shout out so your face will briefly come up on the screen?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be part of the Community Climate Solutions team. I'm pretty new to the organization in general, so I'm just learning still and taking everything all in. But yeah, I don't really have much more. I live on the far west side of Madison with my husband and my daughter and my 5 animals. And yeah, just excited to be here.
Thank you, Rachel. I just wanted to put a name to the face.
And I want to say one more thing, which is that we are continuing to get support from our wonderful Julia De Palma. Julia has moved to Colorado where she has a new job, but she's continuing to do a handoff with Rachel. And I'm just amazed by Julia. So I'm not saying goodbye to Julia yet.
Okay, next slide. Oh, Stephanie, have you recovered from Tuesday night?
More or less, yeah, and feeling just really happy and excited to share with all of you that we were able to exceed our fundraising goal for Giving Tuesday, $2,000 for grassroots climate action, which is amazing. And that success is definitely thanks to our incredibly generous community. So I'd like to start by just thanking everyone who contributed to the campaign. You can see that it was truly a team effort. We had about 145 donors. All of our teams contributed baskets, and many of our members and volunteers also contributed items or skill shares to our silent auction. We had more than 100 items. This year we had 65 business donors, which is more than twice what we had last year. And 50 winning bidders, 11 peer-to-peer fundraisers. So it was really definitely a group effort. And I'd like to just express our deep thanks and gratitude for the support. We celebrated on Giving Tuesday at Garver Feed Mill. We're so much to celebrate about an amazing year where we transitioned to become 350 Wisconsin. We had over 80 attendees and debuted a new inspiring Together for the Climate video, which was created by one of our volunteers, Alicia Schoberg. We enjoyed good company, food, chair massages, a wonderful group art project from the Art Collective, and so much more. It was really wonderful to see everyone and be together. So just really happy to share that and to say that Giving Tuesday puts us in a really great position going into our year-end charitable giving season. We are looking to raise a total of $50,000 by December 31st. So, and that of course supports all our terrific campaigns and other initiatives. So yeah, so thank you so much everyone for your support. And that's all I had to say.
Thank you, Stephanie, and everybody else who worked on what a wonderful event. So just midday, Emily Park asked if she could come on to share some breaking news. So Emily.
Yeah, so my laptop decided to freeze up, so I switched over to my phone. So I was going to paste some stuff in the chat, but if somebody else can maybe do that for me, that would be great. I think a lot of people here have heard about this Manchin dirty deal. He's calling it pipeline permitting reform. Essentially what it is, it's a deal to fast track pipeline permitting, sidestepping a lot of environmental reviews, sidestepping any concerns about frontline communities, and basically make it easier to build pipelines, particularly the Mountain Valley Pipeline that cuts through West Virginia, Manchin's backyard. As we all know, Manchin is a literal coal baron. So the latest news as of just this afternoon is that the House is going to be voting on whether or not to attach this Manchin dirty deal to something called the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act. Essentially, this is the military funding bill. And if this dirty deal gets attached to the NDAA, it will be extremely difficult to defeat it because the NDAA pretty much always passes because it's the military funding bill. So what we need this to not be attached to anything that's a must-pass piece of legislation. This vote is happening tomorrow morning on the House floor at 9 a.m. Eastern time. So this is like literally do this right now. So this phone number here on the screen was set up by the People versus Fossil Fuels Coalition. If you call it and then put in your zip code information, it'll connect you to the correct House representative. And then there's a little script here. If you're fortunate enough to be in Mark Pocan or Gwen Moore's districts, like a lot of us are, those are two of the House representatives who have come out in opposition to the dirty deal. So they're really strong allies, but it can't hurt to remind them that this is something that we are really, really wanting. So yeah, so you can use a script if you want, or you can speak from the heart. It literally takes 90 seconds. So if you can do it like right now, that would be great. 90-second action that could have really, really, really huge implications for fossil fuel infrastructure and climate justice in the United States.
Okay, we're going to go into silence for the 90 seconds, maybe 120 seconds, so you can make the call. I'll put my phone on to ring. Well, if you can start wrapping up. I'm afraid I was talking to Mark Pocan and my alarm was at the end of my call to him. So please wrap up. Christina, why don't you advance the slide? I can't tell if people are pretty much done, but I'm going to go forward. And if you're still talking to your congressman, I apologize. So we have all these different teams. If you want to learn more about the teams, you can contact a team leader. You can also contact Nikki Darga, who helps connect volunteers. She's our volunteer engagement coordinator. And we'd encourage people who are new to meet and chat with Nikki now. Next slide. I think I have these different teams. Tarzan's met just today, I think, Climate Justice, Second Mondays, Communication Action. You met Emily Park, who leads that team, Divest and Defund. We're not meeting in December. Next slide. You've heard that we have the Community Climate Solutions team. The third Thursday is the Art Collective. State policy, fundraising, and this monthly meeting team. We are meeting on Friday. So contact any of us if you want to get involved. Or next slide. And I just want to let you know that in addition to the teams, we also welcome you at our public monthly meetings. They're open to everyone. We're excited that on Monday, January 9th, we will hear Angie Smith speaking about climate refugees.
Actually, that's Angie Dickens.
Oh, I'm sorry. I have the wrong name.
That's okay.
Correcting that. Angie Dickens will speak about climate refugees. And it may be a hybrid meeting. We'll get back to you on that. Our February meeting will return to the first Monday of the month. Yes, and one of those meetings will be hybrid. So next slide, or I think our last slide, is that we have the breakout. So if you're new, do nothing. Stay in this main room and Nikki will meet with you. If you would like to if you have more questions or just want to hang out and talk with Kyla, it's Kyla Smith. You must have been a bit tired last night. She will be in room, you go to room 1 and you just go, in a moment, we'll open the breakouts and then you'll hang out, you'll go to room 1. Now for room 2, I'd love to meet with people who'd be interested in hearing about being a customer and going to talk with your bank manager. So, and if you're very tired, we can also say good night and we'll see you in the new year. So let's open up the breakout rooms.
You can also stop recording